Mr. Headmaster, members of the staff, boys, I want you to imagine a bowl of porridge. A bowl of cold porridge.
Hello, and welcome to the last helping of MicroLive. Today, a summary of the breakthroughs in computing since the 1950s and a look at some of the exciting developments of today.
We examine the short and tragic life of computer pioneer Alan Turing, who is now the subject of a new play in London's West End.
And we'll be seeing at heart one of the world's most prestigious research laboratories. They're helping design, of all things, Chinese temples.
But first, back to the cold porridge, words spoken by Alan Turing, the British pioneer of electronic computing. Turing was part of the team which broke the Germans' Enigma code, an achievement which was crucial in winning the Second World War. He then went on to Manchester University to work on the development of the world's first digital computer, which could use a stored program. Now, as early as 1936, Turing predicted the idea of a universal machine which could be programmed to do a whole range of things, very much like today's computers.
Turing is the unlikely subject of a successful stage play, Breaking the Code. The play is running to capacity audiences at the Haymarket Theatre in London. Derek Jacobi plays Alan Turing, and during a long speech to his old school, he describes what a computer is.
Now, many people say that a computer can only do what it's been told to do. Well, it's true that we may start off that way, but it is only the start. A computer can be made to learn. Suppose, for example, it was set to play chess. Well, it could find out for itself, in the light of its own experience, which were winning and which were losing strategies, and then drop the losing ones. See, after a time, he wouldn't know what instructions it was actually following. That would hardly be fair to say that we had instructed it what to do. That would be like crediting the masters with any originality shown by the pupils. The question thus arises as to whether or not we would credit such a machine with intelligence. I would say that we must.
Turing was quite prophetic for his time, even anticipating artificial intelligence. I find this quite extraordinary, considering the primitive nature of the computer he was actually dealing with. It was a true first-generation machine with a very limited memory. Later on in the play, he discusses this memory with a colleague who helped him break the code at Bletchley Park.
Yes, I know.
We built a digital computer. You remember all my theorizing about universal machines? We've done it. We've made one. It's all thanks to the war, really. It's all thanks to the work we did at Bletchley.
Why?
Well, electronics.
How?
Well, he did it at Bletchley. Nobody had ever thought of using electronics to carry out logical operations, like adding, multiplying, and so on. And that was just what I needed because, see, a computer has to carry out hundreds of thousands of logical operations every second. So electronics gave us the necessary speed, which left us problem number 2, memory. First, we created a memory by using an acoustic delay line.
Using sound waves?
Yeah, it takes 1,000th of a second for a sound wave to travel on a few feet of pipe, so that for that period, the pipe could be said to be storing the sound wave.
Well, the radar people used that idea during the war, didn't they?
That's right, yes. We pinched it. We used the delay line to store the pulses of an electronic computer. Even now at Manchester, we have little television screens. You can actually see the numbers and information stored inside the machine. You can see them on the little monitor tube, little bright dots.
How exciting. It must be so exciting.
Well, it would be if the organization wasn't so rigid.
In the speeches that you give, how do you know those were the words he actually said?
Well, they're not all the words he actually said, but at the beginning of the second act, I come out and address the boys of Sherborne School, and that is based on transcripts of one of the broadcasts that he made for the BBC. In their wisdom, the BBC, when they were making him invisible and a non-person for being naughty, they wiped his voice from the tapes. It would have been wonderful to have just heard his voice, the real Alan Turing voice, but they kept what he said, and Hugh used that. So the analogy of the brain looking like cold porridge is vintage Alan Turing.
You actually mentioned him being naughty, but in breaking the code, there are actually two different meanings, aren't there?
Yes, it is the breaking of the Enigma code, but also the breaking of the moral, ethical code of the time, because he was homosexual. And this was before Wolfenden, before the 1967 Act. So
whilst it was still quite illegal. Were you surprised that people enjoyed a play like this with such a heavy technical content?
Very, yes. Knocked out, stunned, actually, because, you know, on first reading, when I first read the play, and I read 3-page-long speeches about mathematical philosophy, and then another 3-page-long speech about how to build a computer and how a computer works, I thought, well, this is going to empty the theatre. This isn't drama at all. But in fact, it is, and the way Hugh's written it, and the passionate way that Alan is involved in his work, it is exceedingly dramatic. I mean, obviously one thought that of the two strands of the play, homosexuality and mathematics, one is box office. Homosexuality is mathematics, but we've proved that it can be, because people have asked for more of it.
Oh, really?
Yes. In fact, bits have been added to the play, and in fact, there's going to be a longer speech at the end, eventually, when I can learn it, as to, in much more detail, how he broke the code. It's my view that a computer, being a universal machine, can carry out any task the brain does. Any task. Now, what I would very much like to do would be to educate a computer. Partly by direct training, partly by letting it find out things for itself. Now, of course, we don't know how to do this yet, but I believe it will be achieved in the very near future. And I feel sure that by the year 2000, it will be considered perfectly correct to speak of an intelligent machine, or to say that a computer is thinking.
Well, computers have certainly come a long way since Turing's day. Current technology products include work on something called fifth-generation computers. But what exactly were the other four? The demarcations are rather hazy, but there have been definite hardware developments, computer milestones if you like, and alongside those, but not necessarily in step, there's also been developments in programming languages. Now, those early first-generation computers were huge, great machines. They were packed full of thousands of valves, and they could only be programmed in machine code using the ones and zeros or ons and offs, which to this day are the only things that digital hardware can understand. Here's the world's first computer program, which would have been entered via a punched paper tape, and you needed to be a mathematician or an engineer to work with it.
The smaller, so-called second-generation machines appeared in the 1960s, and they were a direct result of the invention of the transistor. They were, of course, more reliable, and second-generation languages like assembler were increasingly being used. Now, assembler or assembly language is a set of mnemonics which help a programmer to enter machine code. For example, the machine code to store a number in a part of memory called the accumulator just happens to be 169. But in mnemonics, it becomes LDA, load accumulator. Very much easier to understand.
But it is still not a piece of cake exactly. One line of assembly code generates only one machine code instruction, which means that only any task at all needs to be broken down into endless small steps. In contrast, one line of a high-level programming language like Fortran generates anything up to 100 machine code instructions. And by the 1960s, this was the sort of language being used by software writers who found it faster because it was easier to use and easier to understand. I mean, you get good English words, things like if, go to is certainly understandable, write and format, and so on. Now, these are third-generation languages, but they were running on second-generation machines. It wasn't until the late 70s and the development of the chip that the hardware caught up and microtechnology became known as the third generation.
This progression towards a more natural human language continues. With this fourth-generation language, Informix, it's possible to write a database application in just a few minutes, whereas, of course, with a third-generation language like, say, COBOL, it might take several weeks. I'm preparing a database about company cars. Now, so far, I've only defined what information each index card is going to hold. But now I need a program to allow me to search through those cards and to add or retrieve information. Well, in this language, I can enter key words like this one, form, build, if I can spell it right. Yes, there we are. and that will generate the program for me. Now, what do? I enter the name for the form. I'll call that V for vehicle, and the name of the database, C for cars. Now it tells me it will be compiled. It's compiled for me, and it's been completed successfully already. Now it runs, and it's produced a blank index card. I can now enter the details for those cars, the owners, and so on. So this is an applications generator. It's a typical fourth generation language. But what on earth is a fourth generation machine? Basically, it's little more than advertisers' hype. The development of VLSI, very large-scale integration, has enabled a complete computer to be built on a single chip. As for instance, there are something like 60 just here. Now, it's arguable whether this represents a whole new generation of machines. The title fourth generation was forced on the world when the Japanese announced that they were working on the fifth.
Yes, the Japanese government has encouraged Japanese industry to invest heavily in fifth-generation research. They have very specific requirements too. They want machines that respond to the kind of language that we use every day, that learn and reason for themselves, and also there's a lot of interest in robots that can see and can interpret what they see. So, where is our future research in this area going to come from? In Britain, the first ALVI research programme is currently being wound up. And only this week, European ministers failed to agree on any more funding for fifth-generation research and development as the British were dragging their heels. But there is one institute here that was set up a few years ago. It's named after Alan Turing, and it pays for its own research by selling its expertise worldwide. Fred now reports from north of the border.
Taking in the real world is something that we as humans take very much for granted. But to a computer, many of the things that we would call common sense are still major challenges. The intelligent computer is still very much in its infancy. And research into artificial intelligence can seem to be bogged down with solving the fundamentals. Even a machine that can play reasonable chess might seem fine as an academic plaything, but not a lot of use on the factory floor. The Turing Institute in Glasgow has an international reputation as a leading centre for artificial intelligence research. But they also explore practical applications of AI for use in the real world, even though some of those applications are a long way off. Peter Murphy's robotics project combines many technologies which are part of artificial intelligence work, including vision systems and software which learns by experience.
It's using 3 mechanical devices that are not linked by wires. The only way that they are being linked in terms of their functionality is through a medium of intelligence connected through sensory systems, vision, proximity and touch.
Imagine this first robot is involved in some kind of circuit fault finding. When it's found a defective component, it takes the part across and places it in the vision area for both robots. It's effectively saying, give me one of these, using vision to pass across what it wants to the second robot. This second robot acts like a storeman turning to its conveyor belt to select a part. A proximity detector senses a component. The arm locates its exact position and then moves it to the area covered by the vision system. Then the software checks whether this part matches the dud component.
We give the vision system many examples of one of these types of component and many examples of one of these types of component, and driven directly from the data, the planning system will generate rules that can then distinguish between these two separate components.
It makes up its own rules?
It makes up its own rules, yes, directly from the data. There is no intervention by a programmer for this task.
This time the components don't match, so the storeman robot returns the part to the conveyor. Once again, by a direct jab, it repowers the belt, picks up a second part, and takes it to the vision area. This time, with a pause to check the correct match, success. The spare part is moved carefully across to a transfer area for the other robot to collect. Now, you've got two robots there working side by side in a very contained space. How do you make sure they don't bump into each other?
Well, that's a very major concern when you start trying to get robots to carry out cooperative tasks. And the simple point about bringing robots into close proximity is that you have to do it very cautiously. And you'll note from the vision system that it always has a quick double look into the area of possible interaction before it very cautiously moves its way into those areas.
Finally, the failed component is thrown away. Well, I can't help thinking it looks like a rather expensive toy. Do people take it seriously?
Well, certainly it has been taken seriously in that we received industrial funding to carry on with this research. But probably more importantly, the reason for receiving that industrial funding was that the company involved has witnessed a number of situations where conventional robotics has run into severe difficulties. And unfortunately, the idea of precise, high-precision robots working in an imprecise, unpredictable world is doomed to disaster.
Whilst research of this sort is vital for AI's future, the Institute needs something more immediately commercial to fund its operation. So, for the moment, most of the work being done at Turing is funded by industry and involves training people sent here from companies all over the world. This training is mainly in the use of so-called expert systems packages, software which can hold the knowledge of an expert as a set of rules and then apply those rules when the expert is no longer there. Professor Donald Mickey is the founder of the Turing Institute. Is AI still just an academic exercise?
Not in the slightest. It's already becoming very rapidly an enormously lucrative business in a whole number of countries. We know that because our subscribing affiliate companies that belong to the Turing Institute Club are scattered in different parts of the world, and an increasing number of them are reporting corporate savings that are running into millions of dollars a year, and in some cases tens of millions of dollars a year, from little bits of software or advice or R&D that we've been able to supply them.
One of Turing's most successful commercial ventures was in the United States, working for a factory making nuclear fuels where targets just weren't being met. They used data about the many physical and chemical processes in the plant, which are involved in the making of uranium fuel pellets. Turing's software actually worked out the rules which governed the plant's efficiency.
After many years of experience and improvement, we got the process yield to be about 80% on a consistent basis. That was good, but we thought perhaps we could do better. And then working with Donald Mickey, and eventually with the Turing Institute, and using the good advice and vision of Dr. Mickey, we decided to try machine learning, which is to say, to let the machines operate themselves. We took a lot of data from the plant, and we have, in fact, so much data in such a plant with process control computers, strip charts, logs of various sorts. It's not a matter of not having enough information, it's a matter of having too much to figure out what to do better. By using the techniques recommended by Dr. Mickey, we found that we can operate the same plant with no change in capital equipment, not at 80%, but in the high 90s. The value to Westinghouse is millions of dollars.
How much interest are you getting from the UK?
Rather sluggish. There is one major oil company who are doing extraordinary work, and they are perhaps in the lead in terms of exciting and very cleverly conducted exploitation of this technology. I think that's the only example for the United Kingdom that comes to mind. And we are a self-funding body, virtually entirely. I would say that only a minority of our funds comes from R&D contracts or from affiliate subscriptions from British companies. Most of it comes from the United States and continent of Europe.
So is Britain missing the boat?
I think that we are, not for lack of capability, which continues very high in spite of the brain drain and so forth. It's something to do with lack of attack.
Well, that seems to be a complaint common to many British research centres. But things are very different in the US, where large corporations provide massive amounts of funding for research into high technology.
Chinese-speaking temple designers can now practice their art on a computer, thanks to Ranjit Makuni, who has just finished writing this piece of software for them. The designer communicates with the computer using nothing but ancient symbols. Within the software sit the strict rules which Chinese temple design must obey. The research centre which supports Ranjit invented some of the fundamental features of the modern computer. The mouse, which allows him to drive the software by indicating a symbol, and the windows on the screen, in which a piece of work which has been half completed can be displayed until it's returned to. Ranjit's temples, mice and windows are all products of Xerox's Park laboratory in California.
The icons, pull-down menus, windows that you see on personal computers and workstations today, those clearly were a Park innovation, and it's interesting to me as I go to trade shows to see almost every PC and workstation today have the kind of interfaces that we had here at Park 10 years ago. The mouse was really developed by, or really discovered by a researcher in another laboratory not far from here. I think we perfected it to a certain extent and understood how it should interface with a computer better than anyone else, and actually introduced it first in our Star workstation in the early 80s. Now, we've clearly not sold as many of those as the rest of the world put together.
The tragedy for Park is that Xerox failed to recognize that windows and mice were a major breakthrough and failed to exploit them commercially. But none would quibble with the far-sightedness of Xerox's original decision in 1947 to fund this machine, the world's first photocopier. It turned Xerox into one of the largest companies in America. It sits in Park's entrance hall in the hope that Park's researchers, complete with their annual budget of $35 million, will come up with something to rival it. Like this idea for making meetings more efficient. It replaces blackboards and notepads with a computer network arranged around a large communal back projection screen. It allows meetings to start with a brainstorming session.
Well, the brainstorming is the first phase of one of our meetings, and it's a period where we try to elaborate the kinds of ideas that would be used in the presentation. So I think the key notion of this part of the meeting is to ensure that ideas aren't left out. So it's supposed to have a very free-form, very uninhibited flow of ideas. The main operation during this period is to put ideas down on the screen, sort of with a small catchphrase. Okay, so maybe I ought to explain that on the side. I'll call that teleconferencing, meaning having visual and audio links. It's different from, I think, a conventional meeting in that you don't have to take your turn. A timid person can just leap right in and put it down whenever he's ready. So it tends to go very fast. We sometimes jokingly say that this part of our meeting runs at 5 times real time because it's so much faster than usual. There's meetings. There's projects that last a long period of time. The second part of the meeting is called the organizational part, and it begins when the number of ideas becomes so complicated that it seems to beg for organization. And there are 2 basic operations during this phase, and those are linking ideas, meaning that one idea comes before another, and also grouping ideas so that you can put together things that are related into a single cluster.
Presentation.
Once the ideas have been arranged in order, they are then expanded and turned into an essay or a presentation. But the strangest thing in Park is its management, which sees financial reward in projects on temple design and brainstorming.
Well, I believe the trademark of a really outstanding research center is for you to be able to walk in and see a large number of bright people who are having absolutely the best time of their life. I think that if they're not having more fun doing what they're doing inside a park than any place else they could be, we're not getting full benefit from those people. And these are the brightest people in the world, not only from the United States, but from all over the world. We have scientists from everywhere. And I believe the thing that really motivates these individuals is to find a kind of environment where they can do what's the most productive thing, the most fun thing that they think they can find.
Xerox have just announced that they intend to have a European version of Park up and running by the end of the summer. Europark, as Xerox calls it, will use this building in Cambridge and will support a staff of about 15 scientists. I'm joined now by Ian Page from Oxford University. Ian, why have they done this?
Well, both the US and our educational system are not producing enough qualified engineers and scientists. And Xerox have noticed that there's a large pool of talent in this country that they can tap fairly easily by offering very good facilities and the chance to work on exciting projects in a place like Europark.
Can the US park be considered a success?
Well, despite the fact that Xerox didn't cash in themselves on much of their research, I think it can. It's certainly the most exciting research establishment I've been in myself, and it has had a spin-off in that lots of the most successful Silicon Valley firms these days are formed by ex-Xerox people.
What about your own research at Oxford? Do you have difficulty raising money for that?
Well, I have had difficulty, and just at the moment I've got a grant application into the Science and Engineering Research Council, which they like, but they have no more money. There's going to be a one-year gap, unfortunately, before I can get the next round of funding, and of course you can't keep good research assistants around and you've got nothing to pay them with. And also I've been trying to get my ideas taken up by British firms for 4 or 5 years with very, very little success. And as soon as I approached an American firm in this country, I not only got support, I got more than I asked for.
Can I ask approximately how much money this is? Is
well,
it millions?
We're talking about £100,000, quite a small amount.
So it's really quite tiny, isn't it?
Indeed.
Now, if Alan Turing, or an Alan Turing of today, wanted to raise money to build a machine as revolutionary as the one he was building in 1946, would he be able to raise money for that?
I'm sorry to say I think he'd have exactly the same problems as he did in fact have.
What about Ian Barron, because he's managed to raise money for his transputer? Was that an exception?
I think it was an exception and he's been very lucky.
Thank you very much, Ian.
Well, that's it. After 4 years, the very last Micro Live. However, we'll be back later in the year with Micro File, when we'll be looking at the best of the items from this present series.
So till then, it's goodbye.
Bye-bye.